Suffering is a certainty in life. Our instincts tell us to turn our back on it and try to escape our pain. But this does not work. In fact, it makes the pain worse. Namaskar, this is Shekhar Sharma, and I welcome you all in the last section of our podcast, wherein today I'll discuss about the teachings of Buddha. Sufferings are part of life. However, there is a way of living that can free us from the suffering and bring joy in our lives. The Buddha's teaching provide a path to transform suffering into joy. At 29 years of age, Siddhartha Gautama left his home to look for the end of human suffering. After 6 years of practicing meditation, he sat beneath a Bodhi tree and decided he wouldn't move until he had attained enlightenment. This awakening flowed like water. The Buddha needed to put that water into different jars so his students could understand its various elements. Those jars are known as the Four Noble Truths and Noble Eightfold Paths. The Four Noble Truths work as a cycle through which you can move to gain peace. The first truth is dukh or suffering. Because you are alive, at some point of time you'll inevitably suffer in body or mind. Samudaya, meaning the origin of your suffering, is the second noble truth. And the cycle, you connect with your suffering so you can explore it. By doing so in the loving and kind way, you can discover the cause of your pain. Once you have uncovered the source of your suffering, you can practice the third noble truth, Nirodha, or ceasing to create suffering. Here you stop doing the things that cause you pain. This makes healing possible. The first three truths culminate in the fourth noble truth, that is Marg or path. This path is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. By following these eight practices, you can avoid the cause of suffering and instead live deeply and peacefully. The first step to healing is embracing your suffering. Healing is impossible unless you choose to embrace your pain. Instead of viewing it as something to run away from, see it as holy truth. Take your suffering into your arms, the way a mother gently picks up a crying baby. Once you have stopped running from your pain, the second turning, encouragement can begin. In this phase, an opportunity to deeply explore your suffering comes. It's akin to the doctors running tests to pinpoint exactly what's wrong. But instead of drawing blood or taking x-ray, you'll use the meditation to become more familiar with your sufferings. In the final turning of the noble truth, realization comes. You receive the result of the exploration you have undertaken, just like a doctor's final diagnosis. The outcome of these three turnings is that you have stopped evading your pain and can call it by its true name. The second step to healing is identifying what's feeding your suffering. In this teaching, the Mahatma Buddha told the story of a young couple crossing the desert with their 2-year-old son. Long before their journey was over, they ran out of food. The couple realized that the only way they could survive was to kill their son and ration his flesh for the rest of his journey. So that's what they did. But every time they ate their son's body, their suffering increased and they wept. Many of us are like that couple. We constantly feed our suffering. Recognizing what you consume is that first turning of the second noble truth, which you'll recall deal with the origin of sufferings. You also feed your senses and mind with the films you watch, the music you listen to, the books you read, and the conversations you have. Your intentions and goals are also forms of nutrients. Ask yourself what's motivating your actions. Are you trying to increase your wealth, possessions, or fame, or are you contributing to the well being of others? Finally, you must pay attention to your consciousness, which has been molded by the past, your own, your family, your society. You can choose to feed your consciousness with love and compassion, or with the hatred and ignorance. Once you have identified the toxins in your diet, you can enter the encouragement and turning by the setting an intention to change your habits. In this phase, you acknowledge that your happiness will increase if you stop having toxins. The final turning realization occurs when you put your intention into action using mindfulness. Pay attention to what you are consuming and avoid toxins. This is how you tend your body and mind in the way that reduces suffering. The third step to healing is acknowledging the joy of well being. Think back to when you were a child. Hopefully, you enjoyed the blessings of a strong, healthy body. But you probably didn't appreciate your well being until you had an accident or got sick. You may only have recognized the wonder of health once that health was no longer available. The third noble truth helps us to access well being by valuing what we have. Before you enter the first turning of the third noble truth, you are like a child who happily takes her health for granted. But by recognizing that you experience peace when you are free of suffering, you begin the next cycle. Even if you are in pain, you can still access this turning by recalling times when you can experience joy or witness. By doing so, you can acknowledge the well being as possible. Like suffering, joy is impermanent, so learn to cultivate a ready supply of it. Use mindfulness to see all the wonders of existence. These are a constant source of happiness. Once you can cultivate joy, you will realize that it is not fragile and rare experience you may have thought it was, because your joy is now based on the marvel of being alive. It is sturdy and true. This turning will prepare you for the fourth noble truth, the path out of suffering. When you begin this phase, you recognize that such a path exists, but you don't know how to walk it. You must encourage yourself to learn, reflect, and then act on that learning. In doing so, you will guide yourself away from pain step by step. To walk the Noble Eightfold Path, you must begin by practicing right view. In this practice, you acknowledge that transformation is possible and arises from understanding suffering. But your right view doesn't end there. It asks you to examine the perception constantly. After all, how you perceive things influence what you believe as true. Picture 10 people observing a cloud. Each person will see something different: a coat, a dog, a hammer. They will interpret the cloud subjectively according to their experiences. Just like the cloud gazers, your perception are influenced by the emotions. For example, if you have had a painful relationship with your father, you might behave aggressively towards someone who simply reminds you of him. In this way, your perception can give you a wrong view, which causes you and others to suffer. To gain right view, you must question what formed your perceptions. Once you are free of them, you will access clear vision, which will bring you understanding. Right view is the view of ultimate reality. The second practice of Noble Eightfold Path, right thinking, will become you when right view is solid. Your thoughts are how your mind speaks. With right thinking, that speech becomes articulated and beneficial. Practice right thinking means seeing things as they truly are, which is very difficult. Often, our thinking is preoccupied with past sorrows and worries about the future. But these thoughts are not usually based on deep understanding, which render them unhelpful. To heal, you must pay attention. Right mindfulness sits at the core of the Buddha's teaching, uniting all elements of Noble Eightfold Path. When you practice right mindfulness, you generate Buddha's energy both inside you and in the world you occupy. The energy lets you see and listen deeply so you can communicate in a way that eases suffering. Right mindfulness leads to the next practice in the Noble Eightfold Path, that is, right speech. When you pay attention to your words, you can evaluate whether they help or harm others. Right speech relies on deep listening, which you achieve through mindfulness. To speak rightly, you must listen and respond to others rather than spouting monologues about yourself. Practice right speech means listening with compassion without judgment or intention to offer advice. Next comes the right action that includes you, other people, plants, animals, and even minerals. This reverence prevents you from harming and killing, supporting those who kill. Every time you hurt someone in this world, you hurt yourself. So, to avoid this cycle of damage, you must practice non-violence. It also includes avoiding arrogance. There once was a monk in Tang Dynasty in China who used to meditate day in and day out. He was proud that he practiced more than other monks, believing that by sitting all day he had become a Buddha. But despite all his efforts, he didn't achieve enlightenment. Next comes the right concentration. It is the final practice of Noble Eightfold Path. Support right diligence. It's practice of focusing your mind on one point. Concentration makes you connect deeply with the present moment. In it, you are stable and still. When you live deeply in the moment, concentration comes naturally. You'll begin to understand that the fruit is also the flower it grew from, the earth that fed it, and the rain that watered it. You'll begin to see that you are not a separate entity, but one made of your family members and ancestors. This will help you to understand that all other lives are as valuable as your own, inspiring you to treasure life in its wondrous form. So, we can say that suffering is a natural part of life. You will inevitably experience it and cause it. But this does not mean that you cannot experience deep joy and happiness every day. If you want to live in a way that frees you from suffering, you first have to embrace your pain and explore it using mindfulness. In doing so, you can identify what has caused your pain and what your pain feeds on. With these insights, you will be in a position to intentionally change your behavior, perception, thoughts, so that you can end your suffering and the suffering of those around you.